here's Mike Pompeo. This is something you tweeted from Trump's last campaign rally in Pittsburgh.
And I often get asked, Mike, what was it like? Right, the Washington Post described me as the most loyal cabinet member to Donald J. Trump. I had to remind the president that they did not mean that as a compliment. They asked me, what was it like to serve for President Trump? And I told them, and I've told everyone hundreds of times in these 3.5 years, it was the greatest privilege that Mike Pompeo could ever have. I was proud to be a part of President Trump's team. I talked to him every day for 4 years, first as CIA director and then as Secretary of State. And what I was so proud of is that we understood the greatness of this nation, and we never once apologized for the United States of America, not once.
So, wait, yeah. play the rest of that, because he says the key thing right toward the end there.
Okay.
Always a not a good sign when someone refers to himself in the third person. You know, it was the greatest honor that Mike Pompeo ever had.
Yeah, that might be a side effect of Ozempic.
Now, President Trump's going to secure our southern border. We will bring peace back to the world. We will take down the ring of fire. We will support our friends in Israel, but he's going to need help to do that.
So he's saying,
go
ahead.
So the Ring of Fire is a reference to the axis of resistance and their strategy of surrounding Israel in a, quote, Ring of Fire.
Yeah, you know, one thing that I've been, again, maybe I'm just of a unusual disposition, so I'm easily aggravated, but I now get accused of having, quote, TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, because I guess there has been a slightly more of an emphasis as of late by me on the contradictions within the Trump movement, the Republican movement. You know, Trump has unprecedented unilateral control over one of the two major political parties. So this seems like a sensible thing to do. He's the three-time nominee of the Republican Party. Again, doesn't have any precedent in recent U.S. history. His influence is just enormous, and he might be on the verge of becoming president again. And yeah, I've been baffled, maybe not baffled, but dismayed by what I think is a totally missing rational critique of Trump. Because if the ordinary voter is just absorbing the predominant critiques of Trump out there in the ether, what they hear is liberals taking offense to his wisecracks, or claiming that they're so outraged by a joke at a rally, or screaming racism, screaming January 6th, and on and on and on. And they're not actually exposed to the rational critique. And I think that's kind of bolstered a new segment of the Trump support base who are just not aware of what he did in office, because it's never amplified within any like reasonable sectors of society, right? It's very unusual. So, like, for example, and Max, I remember talking to you about this. Like, I felt like I was pulling my hair out because Trump was absolutely critical in facilitating the passage of the largest ever disbursement of Ukraine war funding back in April. He worked hand in glove with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and his emissaries in the Senate, Lindsey Graham, Mark Wayne Mullen, Kevin Cramer. I have people who participated in this on the record that Trump's political license was actually critical. So, I mean, so the reason why people accuse me of having TDS is because I feel like there's a totally missing critique out there that should be more widely known and is nowhere to be found. So, yeah.
Just one thing. Mitch McConnell personally thanked Trump for the passage of the Ukraine funding.
Yes.
That's how instrumental Trump was to that. And, you've pointed out that actually, for example, Liz Cheney, despite this image we have where it's like Liz Cheney versus Donald Trump and they're like diametrically opposed, that policy-wise, Liz Cheney stood with Trump most of the time because Trump actually carried out most of her priorities. And so, my thoughts on what accounts for this is basically they don't like Trump, not for really policy reasons, but because he's too much of a loudmouth. He puts a bad face on the global empire. You're not supposed to say things like, we're in Syria to take the oil, which is what Trump said. You're supposed to say, we're there to spread democracy and fight terrorism. And that's what this comes down to. It's a branding thing, not a policy thing. And then and you pointed this out when you talk to his Trump supporters, there's this widespread belief that he's always being duped by his own aides, right? He's always being conned, and he just, he didn't know that, Julian Assange was being persecuted under his watch, even though that was his Attorney General, William Barr. And he's always like the helpless victim of the deep state within his own ranks. He never has any agency. And the reality is he has no convictions. He has no policies. And to the extent he has convictions, he's never willing to, dispense any political capital or energy to actually push them through. So, for example, when he ordered U.S. troops out of Syria, he was just ignored, and he stood down. He didn't make an issue out of it.
Quick update before Michael chimes in. The New York Times Needle has Donald Trump at a 68% chance of victory. Looks like Trump's going to take Georgia and North Carolina, and Virginia is leaning to Kamala Harris. The population of Northern Virginia and Richmond continues to grow, so that bring people coming in for tech jobs, and that's no surprise. Pennsylvania remains a toss-up along with Michigan and Wisconsin, but we don't expect many numbers from Michigan and Wisconsin for at least another hour. So, Michael, you were saying?
Yeah, on the Liz Cheney point, this has been very annoying as well because, Trump, I think, shrewdly identified Liz Cheney as a convenient foil because obviously the Kamala Harris campaign elevated her. She was a central focus in the Democrats' closing message, amazingly enough. And it's still bizarre to even say that, but it's true. And Trump kind of latched onto that adroitly with a political astuteness. I mean, that Trump, if Trump has, I don't think anybody can deny that Trump has a good political antenna, right? That's what got him who he is. And so he starts bashing Liz Cheney and saying she's a warmonger and making this contrast between the two of them as though they were eternal ideological enemies. But in reality, Liz Cheney was one of Trump's most stalwart defenders when Trump was in office. It didn't take me that long to dig up clips of Trump praising Dick Cheney while he was in office, saying he's a tremendous supporter, and heaping praise on Liz for doing his bidding in the House of Representatives on Israel policy and Iran policy, even on Russia. I mean, Liz Cheney cheered the abrogation of the INF Treaty, for example. And to add to the irony, it's not only that they were in total sync, or they were largely in sync when he was president. The one area where they did at least have a surface level disagreement was over Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Liz Cheney introduced an amendment to the 2021 National Defense Authorization Act that would have somewhat bureaucratically stymied Trump's ability to withdraw from Afghanistan, which he claimed that he wanted to do. He could still ultimately have been able to do it, but she was trying to throw up obstacles. And of course, she had the assistance from the Democrats on the House Armed Services Committee, who were all in favor of making it more difficult for Trump to withdraw from Afghanistan. But now, fast forward 4 years later, Trump has retroactively adopted Liz Cheney's position on Afghanistan. Trump goes around saying that he was never going to withdraw. The Pompeo-Trump Taliban agreement that called for the complete withdrawal of all U.S. troops from Afghanistan, from all remaining bases, Trump now said he was never going to fulfill, and it was moot, and he was going to keep a permanent occupation force in Afghanistan at Bagram Air Base, and then the ancillary combat missions that would necessarily require, because he says it's close to China's nuclear arsenal, and he wants a permanent U.S. troop presence there to, I guess, antagonize or intimidate China. And he retroactively adopted Liz Cheney's position. So not only were they partners when he was governing, but now he's actually more in league with the Liz Cheney foreign policy paradigm than he was when he was president on this issue. And yet the popular depiction is that they have this fierce conflict between them. And it's kabuki theater. It's like WWF style feuding.
Well,
there's no underlying policy content to it.
Ideologically, they might not, but it seems like the strength of the Donald Trump campaign is taking hated figures and turning them into foils. He's done that with Adam Schiff. He's done that with Hillary. He did it with Hillary Clinton. And, when he wins so strongly in Florida, more than he did in 2020, yeah, there were some major advantages that Joe Biden had in 2020 where he could campaign from his basement because of the whole COVID event, the mail-in ballots. It wasn't really an in-person campaign. And now it's a campaign where Donald Trump has the strength of outperforming his rival at rallies. But I feel like a lot of Trump voters are just voting on the basis of their hatred for what modern liberalism is and on the specific figures that Trump picks out as his foils. And in many cases, they are truly detestable people. I mean, I was listening. One of the greatest, truest things that Donald Trump ever said was Adam Shit, referring to Adam Schiff. And I was listening to his rally last night on C-SPAN, and he was just going off for 5 minutes straight about how Adam Schiff's neck is 4 inches wide, but his head is like a giant watermelon, and that his head is going to fall off his neck. And it was all like Adam Schiff's physical attributes. And I mean, most people in America don't seem to know who he is, but within Trump's movement, they just hate him. And they were going wild about it. Then Megyn Kelly comes on and she's going off about Doug Emhoff and how he beats women. That's what the whole rally was about. And so I think part of the reason that Trump did so well in Florida is because of the amount, because of their ability to expose how detestable these people truly are. It doesn't matter if he's ideologically opposed to Liz Cheney and that he himself is a man of peace and she's a chicken hawk or not. It's that there are many Americans who recognize these people to be detestable. And then Kamala she'll say Trump is a fascist, but you don't have these colorful caricatures of all of the people that liberals hate. She's saying we just need to get over the division. People don't want to get over the division. People want to feast on the division and destroy those they culturally despise. And I don't think people are that interested in policy, even when the economy should be a top issue and many people are suffering. I think, that's what this is about. The Cheney family, like what kind of a crazy own goal is that on Kamala's part to not only campaign with Liz Cheney and praise Dick Cheney, but then in one of your final statements to descend from the tarmac and deliver a statement to the press claiming Liz Cheney is being threatened by Trump and mentioning her again and again and again, when any American with any connection to the Iraq war hates her. So I think it's effective strategy for Donald Trump. And
he certainly exploited that. He campaigns as the president of peace. He's, launched an appeal to Muslims in Michigan by pointing out all the carnage that the Cheneys caused in the Middle East. And
as he did with the Bushes, and he destroyed the Bush family in 2016. So I think what Liz Cheney is trying to do here is she saw from the January 6th committee an opportunity to ingratiate herself with the national security establishment that was embedded that had embedded himself in the post-2016 Democratic Party, and that this would allow her, while her father is still alive, to save his good name and bring him back into the limelight because she felt so bad about him being denigrated and called a war criminal and a con artist. So for her, it was about her family. The Democrats gave her that opportunity. And if Trump wins, I think one major reason will be that the Democrats decided to let the Cheneys back into the fold.
And what made it easier to let the Cheneys back in the fold is after 2016 embracing Russiagate, which centered on neocon dogma. This idea that Trump's call for having better ties with Russia was treasonous. And the biggest exponents of that message were neocons. And that totally cemented their place that was already there at the top of the Democratic Party. And they've only gone further to the right since with the Ukraine proxy war, which I think wouldn't have happened if not for, well, actually, I shouldn't say it wouldn't have happened, but certainly it was fueled by Russiagate. And there's been no reckoning for that. And also no reckoning with like the condescending attitude that Russiagate underscored, where the attitude among liberal elites, and this was broadcast across the media, was that millions of people who voted for Trump and not for Hillary were duped by the Russians. And so that people are so malleable that they can be fooled by dumb memes that nobody actually saw. And to pursue that goal, they also weaponized the government. They did weaponize the Justice Department, the intelligence agencies, to undermine an elected president based on a ridiculous allegation that he was a Russian agent. And people don't forget that. People don't forget that an elected president, wherever you think of him, was undermined and investigated on totally baseless grounds. And that continued after he left office with all these different cases. Some of them, I think, had some merit, but a lot of them didn't. Like the case in New York, Michael, I mean, you covered this, like the campaign finance case, which was just ridiculous. And I think that served to Trump's advantage because it cemented his self-image as like a anti-establishment figure targeted by the powers that be.
So we've got Ali Abunimah coming on in about 5 minutes. Michael, definitely want to get your response to that. But, also in closing, like since you've been on the ground, what do you think is going to happen? I don't know if the results will even be announced tonight, and why do you see it going that way? What's your crystal ball?
So you would hope that someone somewhere would deign to point out that while Trump is claiming to have this deep ideological conflict with Liz Cheney, he is simultaneously parading around with Mike Pompeo. I mean, I was at the Reading, Pennsylvania rally that he held yesterday afternoon where he called out to Pompeo and had him stand up for applause. And also in the entourage was Tom Cotton and Marco Rubio. Okay, so if those are the people around Trump, what is the meaningful policy distinction between that cadre and Liz Cheney? Nobody can really explain that. And nobody cares to identify that as a contradiction, but I think it would be illuminating because, in talking to voters today, I do have to say that the emptiness of the Democratic message, I think, is going to be a decisive factor if things trend the way that they seem to be going right now and Kamala is defeated.